And welcome back to Make That Feature. This is the second part. It's going to follow on from last week's video where we were taking a look at how to make a collection screen a little bit like you see in Tomb Raider or Uncharted. So without further ado, let's jump straight in. Let's see what we did last week and then we'll carry on building our functionality. Let's go. What do you want? So let's have a look at what we did last week. We set up our 3D environment and we also... Do you mind? I'm trying to shoot a video here. Wait, you can't just hog the microphone. Try that again. So last week we went around and we installed our environment and we also made our Raycaster on our camera so we could interact with the world. This week we're going to take those rays and we're going to figure out what to do with them. We're going to create an object in the scene that we can click on, and this is very distracting. And once you've clicked on that object, do you mind? We send that to our Raycast Manager to establish what to do with it and see if our Interactable has a certain script on it. That'll make more sense as we go through, but let's, for the moment, have a quick look and run around our scene. So here we are, this is where we left it last week, and you can run around here. You look on the bottom left, when we click on things with our left mouse button, anything with a collider on is going to report a hit. So now that we've got this functionality in place, we need to establish what to do with that. But we need some things in our world to interact with, and we need to create some collectibles. And for the sake of this tutorial, all we're going to do is I'm going to scatter around a couple of cubes. Here's one cube, and we have another one over there too. These are going to be the objects that we're going to be interacting with. So these are going to need to be set up with our system. And to do that, we're going to create a C# script called Interactable. So we're going to go to our scripts folder, right click and go create C# script. And we're going to call this one Interactable. So anything that we're going to interact with in our game, this script could go on it. So once that's compiled, let's drag and drop it over onto our cubes. So here we've got our cubes. These are our interactables. Let's go ahead, just so we can see this easier. I'm going to call this Interactable Cube. So we've got these two interactable objects in the scene, both with an interactable script on it that we haven't yet written. So our player's going to run around, they're going to click on this collider, but at the moment it's not going to do anything. And we're going to wire all that functionality up now. So if we go ahead and click on our interactable script to open up in Visual Studio. Right, so you can see from last week we've got our Raycaster script here. And all this is doing at the moment is just debugging to the console what we've hit. And we've put a comment in here last week to pass the hit object to the Raycast Manager, which we'll do in this lesson. For now, we're just going to go back and click on our interactable script, and this is what you'll have. Just a standard Unity class set up, ready to go. And all these scripts are actually really kind of small. And shouldn't take too long at all. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and delete lines 1 and 2. We don't need those namespaces, and we also don't need our start or our update functions. So let me give you a bit of insight into how I think this setup is going to work. So when you click on an object, and you can literally click on any object in your game really, we want to know what kind of object has been clicked. So this interactable script is going to sit on any interactable object in our game. Now that could be literally anything. It could be like a weapon, it could be a power-up, it could be health, or it could be just an artifact that goes into your inventory as a collectible item. So how can we differentiate between those objects? Well, one way to do it is to store the type of object that it is inside an enum. So we're going to create an enum here, and it's going to... syntax for that is private enum, and we're going to call this interactable type, and then we're going to open up some curly braces. And now you kind of want to think, and you can add to this over time, but for the sake of our game we kind of want to think about what collectibles or what items we're going to have that's interactable in our game. We know we're going to have a collectible interactable type, we might have a power-up interactable type, and we might have weapon interactable type. And there may be more, and you can go ahead and add new ones to this by going to the last one, adding a comma, and then typing whatever it is in there. For the minute, we're just going to leave it there. I think that shows that example quite well. But we want to be able to select what interactable type our object is in the inspector when we're setting it up. And to do that, we can create a variable, and we're going to make it serialized field so we can see it in the inspector. And it's going to be of type interactable type. So essentially, we're going to be able to choose in the inspector what interactable type we want our object to be. So we need to say here interactable type, and you can see it comes up in the list. And then you want to give this a name, and it's normally a lowercase version of the enum. So I'm just going to put here interactable type. See there, I've got a small I. So let me show you what this does in the inspector. Now if we hop back into Unity and just wait for that script to compile, you can see now here we've got this drop down called interactable type, and we can click on there and select power up, weapon, or collectible. Both of mine are collectibles, so I'm just going to make sure they're both on collectible. And then back in Visual Studio, we're going to set the parameters of this interactable. We're going to need to think about what data we want our interactable type to have. So we can use this interactable script to hold things such as the object information, and that could be like a title and description of this collectible object. So let's go ahead and add those. Again, this is all, we're going to need to pass these values around. So we're going to make these public so we can access them from another class, and we're going to make a string, and this is going to be the interactable info title. So what is this interactable object called? Because we're going to show this on the collectible screen, you might want a description, so we can put string interactable description and finish it off with a semicolon. So that's cool. Let's go ahead and save that. Let's jump back into Unity and see what we've got so far. So you can see here we've got interactable info title come up and description. So we could go ahead and give these two a name. So let's say this one was rare crystal. So the player would run around, come up to this object, click on it, and they'd see that it's a rare crystal. And then you want to give this object a description, and you see you can type in for ages here, but what's quite good is you can increase the area of this text box. So if we jump back into Visual Studio a second, where we've got our interactable description, go ahead and open a square brace, and we can just say here text area and save. And then when we close that down and it compiles, you see here we've got a much, spelled description wrong, what an idiot. And you see here you've got a much bigger box in order to write our contents. And you can increase the size of this in your script if you want to. For now I'm just going to write a very rare crystal made by Walter White. Boom. And then you can go ahead and do the same for the second one, anything you want. Maybe we can call this one Lost Artefact, and the description here is something quick and easy. Dates back to pre-human times. So that's the data filled in for our interactable objects. And now all we need to do is write a method, and this method is going to control what happens once this object's been clicked on. It's going to be a void, it's not going to return anything, and we're going to call it enable object interaction, parentheses, and then curly brackets. Because we have many types of interactables, we're going to need a way to kind of filter what we do with this object. For instance, if this object was a power-up, then once enable object interaction is called, then we might be adding on 10 or so points to our health. Or if this object is a weapon, then we can send it off to another class in order to control what happens to it once we've collected it. And we're going to need to kind of filter what to do with these three options, or however many options you have. And to do that, we're going to use a switch statement. So I'm going to use switch, and what the object we're going to be switching is the interactable type up here. This is what we want to decide on what to do with our object, depending on what interactable type it is. So if our interactable type is going to be collectible, we're going to do these bits. For a minute, I'm going to put here collectible selected. We need a break after that. And then you can do exactly the same thing for each type of interactable object that you have. So you can just copy paste where you've got interactable type, just put your dot there, and we can change it to power up. here will be power up selected. And the last one that we have in our game, we're not going to use any of these. It just shows you how you can use your code to be quite flexible. And this is if we've got weapon selected. So this switch statement is going to look at what object type has been selected, and it's going to do a task based on its interactable type. So we're not going to actually be using either of those two cases. So I'm going to comment those out to make it clearer for the tutorial. We're just going to be focused on this, on the collectible interaction type. So when our object is interacted with, we're going to look at what collectible type it is, and then we're going to decide where we go from there. But how do we enable the object interaction? We've written this method, but currently we're not calling it from anywhere. And this is where we're going to have a look at our Raycaster and just tweak that script a little bit. Let's have a look at that now. So we wrote this script last week in our last tutorial, and this was our Raycaster. And as you can see here, we put a comment in to remind us what to do. Pass hit object to Raycast Manager. We haven't wrote that Raycast Manager yet, so we're going to go ahead and do that. So let's go back to Unity. Let's go right click, create C# script, and we'll call this the Raycast Manager. And we need to put this script on an object in our hierarchy. So we're going to right click, create empty, and call this Raycast Manager. I'm going to put it at 000 and move it to the top. And I like to keep my hierarchy kind of organized, so I'm just going to make a little like title empty game object here, and then move up to the top. So I've got my managers all in there in one area. So on my Raycast Manager, I'm going to drag that Raycast Manager script and then double click it to open up in Visual Studio. So what do we want this script to do? So when we raycast, we need to pass to the Raycast Manager the object that we've hit so we can decide what to do with it. But our Raycast script from last week doesn't know about our Raycast Manager yet. It doesn't even know that that script exists. So we need to create a link from our Raycaster to our Raycast Manager. There's a couple of ways to do that. We can create a singleton and get easy access to an instance of the class Raycast Manager. But because we have only one Raycaster in the scene, it doesn't take much effort just to create like a hard link, if you like. We actually create a variable here in our Raycaster that is of type Raycast Manager, and then we can just drag and drop it into the inspector. Let's go ahead and do that. See here we put a comment in last week, a link to our Raycast Manager. Let's go ahead and put that in. No other scripts need to know about this, so we can just put a serialized field. It's going to make it private but visible in the inspector, and we can say private Raycast Manager. See, it's just popped in at the bottom there, and then we just can put Raycast Manager, its name. So let's set all that up. So we're going to find where our Raycaster script is, and that is on our main camera as a child called Raycast object, and you can see it's just populated here, Raycast Manager. It's currently none, so we'll go ahead and drag and drop that Raycast Manager into that little box, and it's going to assign that script automatically. So that's great, but now we've got a handle on that script. We can jump back into Visual Studio, and now we can pass what we've hit to our Ray Manager. And bear with me, it's a little bit of jumping about, but that's okay. We've got all our scripts open that we need. So on where we've got Raycast Manager, go ahead and click on there. We currently don't have any methods for the Raycaster script to pass anything to. So we need to create a public method in here that can determine what to do with the object that's just been hit. So we can call this method object hit, parentheses, and then and then the curly braces, and don't forget the void in there. We're not returning anything. So now we've got this method in here that's public, which means that any class can kind of access it. So we can say here, pass the object to your Raycast Manager in our Raycaster script. Now all we have to do is access our Raycast Manager, which we have just created a variable of up here, and then dot, and then start typing the name of the method we just created, which is called object hit, and it's just popped in there. So this would work perfectly fine. We are now calling a method in another script called Raycast Manager to determine what to do. But we also need to pass it the hit, the object that we have raycast, and we've hit an object in the scene, and it's stored in hit. We're going to send hit away to the Raycast Manager to be analyzed to determine what to do with. You'll notice we've got a little squiggly brace. don't worry, let's save this script, this is all good, and hop back to our Raycast Manager. And because we're passing hit, and hit, if you look here, is a variable, it's hit is an object of type Raycast hit. What we need to do in our Raycast Manager is put Raycast hit here, and then we want to make a variable called object hit. So we're passing that hit object from our Raycaster. We've walked around our scene, boom, hit our left mouse button, hit an object, it gets stored, and we send it to the manager. So back in our Raycast Manager, we need to determine what to do with this object. Sometimes you might not want to do anything, and that's cool, but in our instance, we want to see whether it holds the interactable object script. If you hit the floor, and it's going to check, this will come through to the Raycast Manager. If it doesn't have the interactable object script in it, well, then nothing's going to happen, and that's cool. But if it does contain the interactable object script, then we can access our enable object interaction method that sits on the interactable script. So we can do all that through an if statement, and we can say if object hit, if we've been passed, that transform.try get component, and the object we're going to try and get hold of is the interactable script. So we're going to say out interactable object. Let's put a big O. We get our namings. So let's quickly go over what's happening here. We're using an if statement, and the argument that we're putting in here, we're checking to see whether the object that we've hit contains the interactable script as a component on it. And that's what the try get component does. It's looking for that component on the game object, and it's going to return true or false. If it returns true, then it's going to store that interactable script in this variable here called interactable object. This is what the out is. If it returns false, it doesn't have that game object. It's just going to return for the moment. So if the object that we've hit does have the interactable script on it, then great. We can use our variable here that stores that script called interactable object. See if I highlight it, it's going to come up here. So that interactable script, we can then say enable object interactions. Just come up automatically there. That's a method, so we're going to need a parenthesis and a semicolon. But if the object doesn't have the interactable script, then we don't really care. So we're going to put return, and that's cool. It's just going to exit out of that method. And we'll go ahead and remove lines 1 and 2, those namespaces we don't need. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's just go over that very quickly. So we're running around our scene. Yeah, and we come up and we click the box, left click. Boom. First thing that's going to happen is our Raycaster is going to shoot out and hit the box. And this is where our script takes over. So we've hit the box. It's going to pass that game object to our Raycast Manager to determine if it contains the interactable object script on it. All that happens here. It's going to go to our Raycast Manager. So we jump there. Our Raycast Manager looks at our object that we've passed, and it looks to see if it contains the interactable script on it. If it does, then it calls a method in that script called enable object interaction. If it doesn't, it just returns. But if it does contain the script, it's going to go enable object interaction, which is here, and our interactable script that sits on our game objects. And this method is going to look at what type of object it is. Is it a collectible? Is it a power-up? Is it a weapon? And if it's a collectible, then it's going to do the collectible stuff. Now for a moment we can now test if this works. So we can take that line out and we can put a debug here. And we can just say collectible hit. Yay! And then semicolon. And then if we jump into Unity, I'm going to click on the console. Clear that. See, we can run up to this wall. Got structure prefab. It's because we still got that debug log in our Raycaster. If I click on a cube, it's going to say interactable cube. Let's pause. And you can see here we've also got collectible hit. So our system is working. And it's going to offer us a ton of flexibility because now it's really easy to kind of add new interactable types. And you can use our Raycast Manager to send that ray or send that hit object out to, if you want to do something special with an object, that you've already hit. So it gives you ultimate flexibility. We've not tied ourselves down anywhere. This code is very easy to kind of extend. So let's quickly jump back into our Raycaster script. We now know that our Raycaster works, so we can go ahead and remove the debug and that pass the hit object to the Raycast Manager. So as you can see here, very simple script for our Raycaster. That's all done. And for the sake of this tutorial, our Raycast Manager is also done. We're now going to be focusing on building up the interactable. I'm just going to tweak this code again. Now we know that it works. Let's go ahead and do something a little bit different. We'll just keep our debug.log in there for the time being. But let's display the interactable info title in the console as opposed to just a generic log. So now when we run around, we go up to our cubes and click, and then in the lower left it will say lost artifact, and this one is a rare crystal. Cool. So where do we go from here? Well, I was hoping to get all this done in another video, but again it's turned out quite long and not wanting to bombard you too much with stuff. So I thought if I just do it in little bite-sized chunks, well, that's cool and okay, and you can just do it in your own pace. But from here we need to create the investigation panel that pops up automatically, and there's a bit of work involved in that, which we'll be having a look in the next lesson. But for now, let's go ahead and get our hierarchy ready for that. Let's make sure we're all nice and organized. So I'm going to copy my empty game object here with managers on it. Doesn't contain anything. It's just like a help me out in the hierarchy so I know where everything is. So these are our interactables. I'm going to copy that. Go above the HUD. That's our heads-up display with our reticule on. I'm going to call this UI elements. Under UI elements, we've got our HUD and our UI event system, and we're going to be adding to our HUD as well in the next lesson, because when we go up to the object, we want to get like a little pop-up in the left that comes up to saying that you found a collectible object, and to click the left mouse button. And then we're going to duplicate UI elements, leave it at the bottom, and we'll call this investigation. So everything below here will be to do with bringing up that window that contains the object you've clicked on and the title and description as well. So that's looking tidy. We've also got a canvas here that's grayed out called UI canvas starter assets input. Delete that, we don't need that one. So yeah, next week we'll create our investigation mode and go from there. Hopefully we won't have to wait so long for that one. I might be able to get a bit more free time this week in the evenings to record that video and get it out for you. But that should be nearly the last one. So it would be quite nice that this is just like a 3-part little mini series on Make That Feature. So if you liked what you've seen and you learned something, then please leave a like on the video. It really helps me out. And also check out my other videos. I've got tons of other Unity tutorials for you to have a look at. So thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next episode, which will be dropping next week. But until then, bye for now.